That smile. You know the one. The kind that doesn't quite reach the eyes but works overtime trying to convince everyone in the room that everything is perfectly, absolutely, completely fine. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from, because what happened at this Netflix event has people replaying the footage on a loop. In today's commentary, we're talking about a moment that wasn't loud, wasn't explosive, and didn't involve a single raised voice, and yet somehow managed to say everything. Meghan Markle at a high-profile Netflix event, reportedly working the room with a kind of carefully calibrated warmth that only someone who has spent years managing public perception can pull off. Smiles, hugs, pleasantries, all of it picture-perfect on the surface. But the internet, as always, watched closer than anyone in that room did. The moment that reportedly set everything off was an interaction with the wife of a senior Netflix executive, an embrace that sources suggest felt less like genuine connection and more like a performance staged for whoever was holding a camera nearby. Body language analysts and casual viewers alike zeroed in on it almost immediately. The hug was there. The warmth, allegedly, was not. But you haven't heard the craziest part. It wasn't the hug itself that people couldn't stop talking about. It was what her face was doing the entire time. Here's what makes this particular moment so fascinating to dissect. Meghan Markle is, by any objective measure, extraordinarily well-trained in public presentation. She spent years as a professional actress before she ever set foot in a royal palace. She understands cameras, angles, and the art of a curated moment better than almost anyone in her position. So when observers start pointing out that something feels rehearsed, that the smile doesn't land, that the body language reads as performance rather than presence, that is not a small observation. That is a trained eye catching a crack in an otherwise polished surface. Reportedly, attendees and online commentators began circulating footage of the interaction within hours. The consensus, across communities that don't typically agree on anything related to Meghan, was strikingly similar. Something felt off. Not offensive, not scandalous, just unconvincing. And in the world of celebrity image management, unconvincing is sometimes more damaging than outright controversy. Think of it like a seasoned poker player whose tell finally surfaces at the worst possible table. Everything about the game looks right. The posture, the bet, the expression. But something in the timing gives it away, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Now here is where the commentary gets genuinely uncomfortable. Meghan's entire post-royal brand has been built on authenticity. That is the word her team has leaned on repeatedly: authentic storytelling, authentic connection, authentic voice. It is the foundation of her Netflix partnership, her podcast work, and her public positioning as someone who escaped a suffocating institution to finally live and speak truthfully. So when a moment surfaces that reads, to a significant portion of the public, as the precise opposite of authentic, the irony does not go unnoticed. It gets amplified. Observers noted that the interaction with the Netflix executive's wife came at a particularly visible moment in the evening, reportedly in a well-lit area of the venue, in clear sightline of several cameras. Whether that positioning was coincidental or calculated is something only Meghan's team knows. But the public has already made its inference. And that inference is spreading. By the time commentary videos and reaction posts began circulating, the framing had already solidified. This wasn't being discussed as a warm moment that landed awkwardly. It was being discussed as a strategic move that got exposed by its own execution. The smile became the story. The hug became the headline. And Meghan Markle, once again, found herself at the center of a narrative she almost certainly did not intend to create. Here is the part worth sitting with. Whether any of this is entirely fair is a genuinely open question. Public figures, especially those operating under the level of scrutiny Meghan faces, are analyzed through a lens so magnified that ordinary human behavior, a nervous smile, a polite embrace, a moment of social navigation, can be reframed into something sinister by an audience already primed to be skeptical. That is the reality of her situation, and it deserves acknowledgement. But here is the other side of that truth. Meghan's team has consistently positioned her as someone with exceptional emotional intelligence and interpersonal awareness. They cannot simultaneously claim that narrative and then dismiss public readings of her body language as irrelevant. You cannot market authenticity and then call the audience wrong for noticing when something feels inauthentic. That is not how perception works. The uncomfortable conclusion that a growing number of observers are arriving at is this: the gap between the brand and the behavior is becoming harder to ignore. Not because Meghan Markle is necessarily doing anything wrong, but because the architecture of the image her team has built leaves very little room for moments that read as human, calculated, or conflicted. Every appearance now carries the weight of proving something. And that pressure, reportedly, is beginning to show. In a room full of cameras, the most dangerous thing you can do is smile like you know exactly where they all are. If you thought that was wild, hit subscribe and drop a comment below. Tell us whether you think that smile was genuine or the most expensive PR move of the evening. Wait till you see what else was reportedly caught on camera at that same event, the exchange nobody is covering yet.